Well, we'll first start off with a little bit of guitar and bass quantizing. If you guys were watching yesterday, you guys all know that we quantized the drums for Tommy's song, and then we actually went through and tracked the guitars first, and then we did the bass last. And I think we got some really solid takes with the guitars and the bass. But like I said yesterday, it's become an industry standard process to make sure everything's on time, and so actually Tommy played really tightly, so it's going to be kind of hard to really demonstrate. So I might actually have to make some guitars and bass a little off just to kind of for the demonstration purposes or whatever. But basically, like I said, I mean, the whole idea of quantizing again is just putting everything in time. So basically what I want to do is put the bass and the guitar in time with the drums, just so everything sounds nice and tight. Now, obviously, if the bassist and the guitar player played nice and tight, I don't feel like you should need to do a lot of quantizing. So usually I try to, if I can tell the musician or the client has a good sense of natural time and rhythm, I try to get good solid takes naturally. And then, so obviously for minimal production work, minimal quantizing would be needed in that case. But there's times when you get a great take, it's clean, everything's there. It's just the part may be behind the beat a little bit or ahead of the beat a little bit, and I'll let that slide when I'm tracking. Like I said, I want to keep the energy positive in recording. I want to keep the momentum up. I want to keep the obviously the time and cost to a minimum for the client. So usually that's something I always want to double check the timing anyway. So if I know it's going to be quicker to edit the guitar or bass part than it would be to actually retrack it, then I keep the take that's good and just decide to fix it in this process. But I usually do the bass and guitar editing at the same time, and there's a few reasons for that. There's not particularly with this song, but with a lot of metal songs and even some rock songs. There's start stoppy type guitar parts where it's just like da 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 da, like rhythm parts, and you want the guitars and the bass to be tight together, and it's just more efficient to grab and edit them at the same time. But okay, usually, like I said, obviously, as you guys at home can probably see, I've tracked direct signals for all the bass, all the guitar, and if you zoom in and look, you can see the rhythm pattern pretty clearly on the direct signal. This is named, called bass direct. That's what I named it. And that's one thing I want to talk about just real quick or whatever, is that I feel like it's important to clearly label your tracks, so you can remember what it, and know what the things are or whatever. And also, in case someone else is working on the project or gets the project for edit and mix, make sure things are clearly labeled, clearly and generically labeled, so that it's not confusing. Like, if I put Tommy amp, the guy, if somebody else ends up mixing the record or something like that, he's going to be like, I don't know who Tommy is, and he'll have to listen and check it out. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Things like I get all the time, like 421 right, and I'm like, I don't know what the 421 was on because I wasn't there, So that, usually I name very generically. Like I said, this is a, bass direct, bass amp, guitar rhythm direct, left, guitar rhythm direct right, guitar rhythm amp left. Like I said, you organize it however you want. I mean, many people actually, group the lefts together. I just, for editing purpose, I do it like this so I can see the direct signals have the a more clear rhythmically, so I can see them together. So you want to have everything labeled and organized clearly. And it just helps, yourself, as you're going through this for a visual. But like I said, I want to group everything. Like I said, I've already actually grouped this, but I'll undo that group. But let's make an edit group on Pro Tools. It's Command G, or you can go under the Groups menu here, and I'm gonna just call this bass. Simple. And then what that does, it just makes, when you're doing the editing, it connects the two. The same thing with the guitars. I want to group and edit. I want to keep in phase the direct signals with the amp signal. So I'm going to group guitar rhythm 1. I'm going to just call that guitar rhythm 1 left. And of course this will be guitar rhythm 1 right. And I'm gonna do all these, and I won't label these all for now, just for speed's sake. But and remember, yesterday, if you were listening in, these are actually mono. And I'll after I quantize, in the mix section, I'll show you why I actually track it like as it's stereo. But so I'm gonna, since this is actually a mono track, I'm gonna group all 3 of these together, just for quantizing purposes. Cool. I think I have everything grouped together. All right, obviously the first thing in this song is the bass. So I'm gonna start off with bass. And what I wanna do, like I said, I want the bass to be in time with the drums and the click track. And luckily, like I said, the drums have been quantized. Let's pretend that we check the drums and make sure they're perfect. They're probably not, because I actually didn't check them yesterday, but they're definitely going to be close enough for the rock style vibe that we want. But I'm going to drag the kick in the snare, because that helps with subdivisions, so you don't have to grab a calculator. Now you can use tools such as Beat Detective, and there's other tools that you can use to help quantize. But like I said, I want to preserve some natural organic vibes, so I just kind of do it manually. I just move the things that I feel needed to be moved. One thing that's worth noting, Tommy played the bass, with a pick, and he played the guitar. It's a little more easy to see on the guitar. You look at each note, and you would think that this is the beginning of the note, but actually this is the beginning of the note. This is the little pick noise, the percussive of the pick. And, it's actually quite large. It's 18 milliseconds. But it's like 1 millisecond, however you look at that. But you need to preserve that. I usually quantize to the note. To me, it sounds more natural when the actual note hits there, and the pick in or the strum in actually happens before the click or the drum. Like gotcha. Naturally, it seems like I've noticed when even I play, I tend to strum into the note. It's like a rake into the note,
so that the actual
note is the down.
That transient
is the actual the last bit of it. So I usually preserve the pick noise. Like on the bass, it's a little more difficult to see. I'll zoom it large just so you can see clearly. Oh, okay. But here's the pick noise. So Tommy, of course, played it too perfect to really demonstrate. But like I said, literally, I just go through and visually make sure it matches the click and the drums. I usually set my nudge. Let's set our nudge to 5 milliseconds, or thinking that's what you call that. So yeah, that's pretty much on time. I just nudged it left. This one, here's the pick noise. And if any of this doesn't make any sense, people can ask questions.
So after a while, you just kind of understand what's happening through visual.
Yeah, that's one thing with me. It's like I've done this so much, I can look at the wave and tell what it sounds like. Now, if you don't know where the attack is, you want to actually listen to it. To make sure there's the scrub tool with Pro Tools. You can hold down Control and drag across, and you can hear where it starts. Yeah, and it sounds awesome. It always freaks the clients out. They're like, oh, that's awesome. Let's do that. But anyway, like I said, I'm preserving that attack or whatever. And the idea, and I'm not going to do all this because, it takes a while, obviously, to go through and quantize note by note manually. And like I said, luckily, Tommy was close enough. A lot of times I would just, kind of look at it and see if it looks in the ballpark and listen to it and just quantize things that sound off. Like, okay, that's, something, it falls behind there.
If something's, obviously this song's very straightforward. If something's more technical on guitar or bass, do you still try to do note by note, or do you still do like if it sounds off?
It sounds off. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
It depends. Like I said, there's a.
Obviously that would take forever.
If you get a metal client who's doing really articulate,
Yeah.
precise, they want a mechanical vibe, then I would, often go note by note.
Really?
Depending on the performance. If the performance is on, then I just leave it alone. But usually that stuff you want a little tighter than say you would want a rock project. There's a theory, if you make it too tight, it's going to sound actually thinner and smaller. There's actually a little bit of the push and pull actually makes it sound the note fatter and bigger, and the overall mix and tones bigger. Especially like if you got two guitars, if you put them exactly on time, you could actually create some phase cancellation if the waves match up exactly. So you don't want them too tight. And if you notice here, I usually when I quantize, I keep it zoomed out. I don't zoom in crazy in like this, Just like with the drums, I leave it a little out so it has a millisecond push or pull here and there. Again, like I said, I'm wanting this to be lined up. Now, there's no visual subdivision, but as we were talking about yesterday, this is 500, so if you need something to line it up, you can actually, I just make it like a little cut. I'm not working on grid mode. If you're working in grid mode, you can actually create a grid that'll show you the subdivisions. You can use that to line up. Basically, all you need is just something to make sure the note lines up. Like I said, this is perfect. That's perfect. Let's find something that we can, I'm going to copy this subdivision. So this is 250 milliseconds. Let's see, this note's maybe a slight bit ahead, it looks like. So I'm going to move it here. Like I said, all you're doing is putting this on time. And I said, Tommy's too on time to demonstrate. Let's pretend Tommy was off, and then I'm actually moving this to. And there's other Creative Live classes that go into this in much greater detail than I'm going to go to today. There's a couple different techniques, people using Beat Detective and things like that as a tool to save time.
So Jamie, when you're doing this, do you generally reference after you do a whole section? Do you work on a section basis and then you get it visually, you know what it sounds like because you visually though, you can tell what it's gonna sound like sort of, and then you play it back after that, or how do you do that?
Yeah, exactly. There's a reason, like I said, obviously for this guy, I'll play the soloed bass. If you listen to it now, you hear that glitch.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're going to need to deal with that before you can actually get an idea if it's in time. Let's pretend that I completed the bass. Like I said, normally I would go through the entire song and do that. And while I do the bass or whatever, like I said, once I get to this section where the rhythm guitar actually comes in, I would do the bass and the guitar at the same time. Let me hide these tracks, these auxiliary inputs. The guitar is going to be a little more visual. But yeah, once I get to this section, I would do the guitars. And I usually do the rhythms. I usually wait and do the leads last and separate, just because they usually don't match exactly with the bass. It's usually the rhythm guitars and bass are playing in lock. Arm all my groups, or not arm, or just engage. Same thing here. Like I said, here's the pick attack. I want the actual note to be here. And this is all personal preference type stuff. Some people actually quantize it to where the pick attack is actually on time. Because you can actually, if it's easier for you to do that, that's fine, because you can actually always just nudge it back later. You know, it's not a big deal. We're just talking an order of milliseconds here. For those of you watching, I know this is extremely boring, but we'll get to some. And Tommy, you can't sing perfect because I have to teach vocal tuning, and if you sing perfect, it's not going to be good.
I don't think I ever sing perfect.
Yeah, but you've done vocals where I didn't have to tune it before, and that's not going to be handy. But yeah, if you follow what I'm doing, like I said, I'm just putting stuff on time. Just like with the bass. And as you notice, I mean, you can tell this is kind of time consuming. I actually have my brother, Kevin King, as my assistant, and I make him do all this stuff.
Make him.
Yeah. Well, I pay him, you know. So he gets
He's
paid.
got a cage.
Yeah. Yeah, but he's like better and faster at this than I am now, just because it's all he's done for in the last 2 years. But he's done it to where, like I said, and obviously, you know, if you do the bass at the same time, you can use the cut points of the guitars to see where you need to be with the bass. But like I said, it's very important to keep the guitars, to keep the direct signals in phase with the real amp tones or real amp simulations, you know, because obviously, like, you know, they look a little different. Like, you can't really, like, if you didn't track the directs, I mean, you look what the amp signal looks like,
Yeah.
you can't tell what the rhythm is, you know, it's almost impossible. Like, you would sincerely have to rely on your ears, which is, you know, is doable. But you can there's a level of precision you can get if you track the directs, you know. And obviously, if you track with a plug-in in the computer, obviously you're not going to see this amp signal at all. So you can quantize, but you still need to preserve the pick attack. Don't cut that off because it'll make the guitar sound unnatural. Okay, let's pretend that I've gone through and we've quantized all this material. Like I said, and then we're going to have, you know, thousands of little chops like this. We're going to need to go back through, and I don't even know if we actually have my favorite time stretch compression plugin, which we do not have it on here, but on this machine. But we'll just use this one for now.
Which is your favorite?
I like Serato Pitch and Time on guitar. There's lots of different time compression expansion plugins out on the market. Different ones that have for different, I think are better. The algorithms are better for different things. Like I said, for the guitar, I like Serato Pitch and Time. For bass, I like Serato Pitch and Time. I feel like it sounds the most natural. For vocals, I like the standard, the one I just selected, the DigiDesign. Let me see what it's called. Pitch shift. Yeah, I think it's just called pitch shift, or not pitch shift, but the time shift or time. Let's see. Didn't know where it's at. But yeah, they have one called time shift, but basically it's just the one that comes stock with Pro Tools sounds. It sounds better on vocals for some reason. I don't know why. There's a DigiDesign or Avid now makes one called X-Form that sounds great on everything. It's the best sounding one on the market that I've used, but the render time, it takes forever to process it. So I use it in times where like none of the other quicker plugins work, or none of the quicker time stretch compression software works. I use it then. Obviously, like, you know, I mentioned about using elastic time. You can use elastic time for this function as well. But like I said, again, elastic time, it uses this standard. You can't use like Serato Pitch and Time. So you can hear the artifacts. Like I said, I'm going to use the standard right now just for demonstration purposes. I'm going to grab this time compression expansion tool now. just for demonstration purposes. But if we listen to this, we'd be able to hear that it sounds weird.
Yeah.
Just because the algorithm that comes stock with Pro Tools just doesn't sound great on distorted guitar or just, or bass, in my opinion. But like I said, we don't have to stretch this much or whatever, so it might sound fine in the mix. So I'm gonna go through these notes. If you notice, I'm cutting and preserving the attack of the note, and this kind of forms how we hear the note, and I'm just stretching the body of the note. Let's pretend I've done all the bass. Let's look at the guitars. Stretch, preserving the attack. I'm going to stretch the sustain of the note. Grab these bass. And part of the reason I just wait till all the tracking's done to do this is because you don't want to. I mean, I know some producers they do all this stuff as they go along, and there's some valid reasons for doing that, but then the client has to sit there and watch you do this, and they get bored, and they're tearing up your studio, and, whatever. They're just and plus they get cold, in between tracking.
Yeah, I think when there's constantly progress, it motivates the artist to.
Yeah, like I said, I try to keep the cost down for my clients personally, and a lot of my clients travel from out of state, even out of country, sometimes, and so basically I want to keep, when we're tracking, that's all we're doing, so they can get their hotel rooms or wherever they're staying. I don't actually have a place for people to stay at my place, but when they get hotel rooms, the minimal hotel stays, maximum time actually working in the studio, and they're not just sitting there watching me edit for half a day or whatever. So, with mics, maybe at first you might want to do the editing first just to make sure it's good before you let the clients leave for good,
Yeah.
But I've gotten a personal experience to know, okay, this is going to be good. I'm going to be able to work with this, and I'm not going to need anybody to retrack anything. So that might be a consideration or something to consider.
So, do you have two workstations then at your studio where your brother can be editing stuff while you keep working, or how do you?
He works at his place.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's got a setup, and I've got he literally only lives 10 minutes from me, so I've got a hard drive, a couple hard drives that we just, he'll come pick them up. Or sometimes if it's a small project, I'll just upload it for him to download. And then he'll just send me the files back. So, so he's working a lot of times. He'll start editing. If we got the rhythm tracks and we still need track leads, I'll just go ahead and give him the rhythm tracks. He can be working on that while we work on tracking the leads at my place and stuff. So it definitely makes it more efficient. A lot of studios, they have multiple engineers. The guys at Audio Hammer, there's multiple people working on different things at the same time to be max efficient or whatever.
Cool.
But that's kind of why I brought him in the fold. And there's options for people. It's something I wanted to mention. Those of you that have home studios or watching and stuff. If there's something you don't know how to do or you don't want to do, just outsource it. You don't have to do everything. I can do everything, and I still, like I said, I still don't, just to make things more efficient. And plus, I don't. If I know I'm going to have to mix the record, I don't want to spend time bogged down and actually doing all the time consumption production editing, because by the time I come to do the mix, my ears are tired. I've heard it mixed badly for so long. It's tough for me to hear the mix objectively after that. I'm just kind of burnt out with the project, and I think so. Bringing other people in the fold and outsourcing. I mean, there's tons of. I'm sure those of you listening and watching, there's tons of you guys who do who offer these services, vocal tuning. I'm working with Evan from Last Chance to Reason for vocal tuning right now, and there's a couple other guys that outsource material to work to, and that's always a good option. Like I said, a lot of people, they don't have a magnificent studio like this to record drums, so it's just instead of buying the $200,000 of gear that you need to do drums properly, or the minimum $15,000 in my mind, you can just. There's people who have this stuff already. Just track the drums with them, until you can, until you have the business, to validate buying the gear yourself, just don't worry about it. Outsource the stuff. Like especially with mastering, I think it's essential.
Yeah.
I got into mastering kind of out of necessity. Just a lot of my clients were just not getting their records mastered, or couldn't afford to get the records mastered. So I started off in the service, or masters were getting done and they just weren't truly mastered, in my opinion. But I recommend it's always a good idea to get another professional's ear on the mix, on the final product or whatever. And there's mastering specific gear, mastering specific compressors, EQs, processing, knowledge. Just experience in and of itself really helps with the mastering. And a lot of times it's a good idea to outsource for that. At the end of the product. But we'll get back into that. But like this is definitely something that can be outsourced. So like, hey, I'm not good at quantizing, or I'm not fast. I'm not efficient with it, or I don't like to do it. Just find someone who does, and oftentimes they'll do it for a reasonable price.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's pretend that I've gone through and I've quantized. I put all the bass notes in time, and I put all the guitar notes in time. And then after that, we're going to want to just crossfade. I'm going to do a batch fade. I'm going to do, let's do 5 milliseconds and see what that sounds like. And let's play this little brief moment. It sounds clean to me. Obviously, normally I would check in headphones and I would listen isolated just to make sure everything. And I could hear that weird stretch plug in, but with a Serato pitch and time, you can't hear that or whatever. One alternate version or a method that I don't usually use for quantizing and filling in those gaps. Some people actually use Beat Detect as fill-in crossfade. It works really good with drums. It sometimes can work with small gaps in bass and guitar audio, but it's not guaranteed. There'll be pops. You'll definitely have to check it using that. With that, like for instance, say there was let's see if like this one we stretched. Let's put this back. Let's see, we can use this edit smooth. And it technically filled in the gap, but the way this works, it's it's a kind of a copy and paste algorithm. So it pulled, you can look at it. You see this particular moment? It just basically copied and pasted this. So that can sound weird.
Yeah.
Might not if it's like a small thing, but it can sound weird. On the drums it works because it's just white noise that is copying and pasting. So you don't notice it. But something with a tone, a pitch and things like that, it just kind of, so I find, with the guitar and bass, I find the stretch method usually works a little better. There's actually another method that sometimes works also that I used to employ a lot. It's just basically like you can just drag the region back and then crossfade the two regions. But sometimes, especially on clean guitar and clean bass, you can hear that. On distorted guitar and distorted bass, you can't. So that's that's definitely quicker than going through and stretching the audio. But obviously, the best thing is just to not do a whole lot of stretching to begin with. Hopefully you get some good solid takes or whatever. If you are stretching, you're stretching minimally. But if you do have to stretch a lot, then try to use the best sounding method you can. Listen through each part individually. Just for those of you watching these gaps, we had a digital sync problem with one of our preamps. We just needed to restart and we didn't do that, and that's why that looks weird right there. But luckily, these riffs repeat over and over, so I could find a moment. I could find whatever that's supposed.
Oh, that's the direct signal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, the amp signal was fine because we used the APIs, but the Focusrite had a digital connection tech issue, and that's why it looks weird. That's easily fixed in this case because we have multiple takes of the same riff, and I could just pull that note from from another part, but we're not going to worry about that right now since you can't even hear the direct signal anyway. But yeah, I think that's all of guitar quantizing. I said leads, I would do the same thing. Here are my lead tracks, I've grouped them. Zoom to where you can see that. And again, like I said, Tommy's spot on. Here's the attack. We want to align, the timing should be here. So this note's actually a little early. Not anymore. And I apologize to you, for those of you at home, that if I'm frying your brain with any of this stuff or whatever. It's kind of one of those things. I've been doing it so long I can't remember exactly like how the thought process goes. You know. Does this seem confusing to you, Tommy?
No, I actually don't know this stuff at all.
Okay,
So
you're getting.
I'm actually
it.
learning something. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people are learning like, oh, I don't want to do that. That looks like work.
Yeah, because I record for demo purposes only, so I'm very lazy about it.
Yeah,
I just play it through. I'm like, yeah, that's good enough, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, of course, obviously, if you're just doing demos, you do. I mean, there's no reason to, to have it perfectly on time. And this is like full production, label spec type. You know, you want it just as good as it can be type of production. And that's one thing I forgot to mention earlier. Usually when I talk to my clients, I try to, because this type of work affects the budget, how much time it's going to take. If you want a record do you want it fully produced, or are you looking to do a demo? Honestly, I feel like going into the studio to do a demo these days is ridiculous. Like, just buy some stuff and do a rough recording yourself.
And don't you think a lot of this has to do with personal preference as far as the band or genre?
Yeah.
Because obviously if a band's like, we want to jam live and we want pick scrapes and feedback between whenever we stop, just...
Oh yeah, there was a lot of killer bands back in the day that...
I mean, even now there's a lot of bands that do that. So I think...
I wouldn't do this to a band like the band like the Chariot back in the day. They're just, it's supposed to sound raw, I mean, there's tons of bands, obviously, like if you're going for a Black Sabbath sound, like we mentioned before, whatever, it's like, this would be weird in that context,
So I think as a musician, that's something to think about before you go in, is like, how spot on do you want things? Do you want things to be, some bands like overproduced, they don't want to sound like a band, in my opinion, but and other bands want to be very, very raw, which is, it's all personal preference.
Yeah, you can draw analogies, like I said. I mean, like movies are. Are you going to go super high produced CGI, or are you going to go legit like James Bond and really blow stuff up and and like have have an organic feel and vibe to it? And there's preferences, and there's times where different things are appropriate, and there's no right or wrong. And I personally enjoy both. I enjoy some stuff that's super produced. I enjoy stuff that's really raw, and if it's good to me. And that's why I actually. I've tried to learn both production styles. Yeah. And a lot of this stuff, like I said, I mean, Tommy was close enough, and it sounds good. He wanted a rock vibe, wanted a natural haze, the band playing at a venue or whatever type of vibe, and so we would leave some stuff, timing wise or whatever that wasn't, that's not 100% on the click track or on the drums or whatever, just as long as it sounds good, And that's kind of the approach with BT Bam. I just kind of go through and double check, see if there's anything that's like crazy ahead or behind. But those guys are so on. It's just like, we spend a lot of time too. We really work hard. And one of the few bands, you guys are one of the few bands that has the time, usually books enough time and has the budget and time to actually do it, a legit organic record, right or whatever, and the talent, But yeah, I mean, it's literally, like I said, just quantizing guitars and bass. It's just about putting it on time. Yeah. And you can quantize vocals also. And like, so we'll get into vocals. Like I've recorded a lot of vocals. It's definitely less particular. There's no like rhythms you can line up visually and stuff. It's definitely all feel and how you hear it. Because some consonant sounds should come earlier than the beat. Some should happen on the beat. Just if you're doing a T or a the, it's gonna sit on related to the drums and the click is gonna sit differently. So the quantizing that, it's just a matter of sliding it around until it feels right. Like sometimes I get great take, but like the vocalist is a little bit behind or ahead of the beat. Particularly happens with scream stuff, with the screaming pattern stuff. A lot of times when a drummer's doing like in a metal project or whatever, they're doing a blast beat or something, it's really hard to feel the downbeat. And the vocals will get a brutal sounding take, and it's like, but it starts to lag behind the beat towards the end or something like that, or he came in late. Instead of having him, just continue to blow his voice out, doing it over and over, the most brutal take he can do, I just take and slide it over into place. It's just, quantizing is just a technical term for putting stuff in time. So just do whatever you got to do to put it in time and have it sound right, something, and try to do the mental, as a producer and as an engineer, I try to mentally think, hey, is it going to be quicker if I just quantize this, or is it going to be quicker and better to just retrack it? Sometimes the answer is like, dude, that is way off. And it'd just be quicker if we just retract this.
So you usually just make that call. You just sort of know in your head.
It
would take this
I'm
much time
making
to quantize
decisions.
it.
Yeah, production decisions. Cool. I try to keep it positive. I don't want to depress people by making them do stuff over and over.
But I think that's the important thing about having an engineer with an outside ear, having somebody else there. It's like, because I know, the band and myself, you'll be tracking and a part, you'll just be like, I nailed that. And you're like, no, do it again. It's like, because that outside ear, you hear things that you can't hear on a personal
And I'm
level.
processing stuff relative to the production in the mix.
Exactly.
And the band's, they're like, hey, that was, solid take or whatever. Or, and sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes the band's like, dude, I don't know about that. I didn't feel good about it. I'm like, dude, listen to it. It's actually really good. Yeah. That squeak in the voice that you thought was a mistake actually is cool.
Yeah.
Things like that. And, I'm listening to it and, I'm thinking in terms of, I'm just, processing on, different aspects of the record. And, it's just, it all ties into every element of production and stuff. And, but there's, like I said, there's some quick rules of thumb. Like I said, just if it's not in time, either retrack it till it's in time or put it in time. It's some of the hallmarks of professional records, from day one. I mean, it's usually more pleasant to listen to, and it's generally more desirable by the client and the labels, is to have everything in tune and on time. There was a time, obviously, during the alternative era where it was like kind of cool to have stuff just kind of grungy, and have it kind of not perfect time, not in time, but, for certain styles of music that still works today, but, large in part, people at this point, they hear stuff that's, as pitchy as the Beach Boys back in the day. It sounds fine to me, but nowadays if you try to turn that into a label, they'd be like, you need to tune these vocals, They sound like crazy, like pitchy or whatever, And it's just one of those things, we're accustomed to stuff being a little more in tune and on time than, the way things used to be. It's just you associate that with a higher fidelity or high five vibe,
So the Beach Boys sound out of tune to you?
Oh, it's pitchy. Yeah, I mean, they're great. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the Beach Boys. But yeah, like I said, you listen to the old records and you can like, hey, that dude's,
I know what you're saying.
the guy's a little sharp, a
Yeah.
little flat,
That's
and it's just,
Yeah.
it didn't bother me or whatever, but if I were recording Beach Boys, I'd probably be like, let me tune this up real quick. Just the OCD,
Yeah.
They'd probably,
And personal preference.
they
too.
probably wouldn't sell any records. No, but yeah, so I mean, I think that's all as far as the quantizing. Like I said, there's other Creative Live things that go in depth with quantizing and different methods to do that. Let me see if there's anything else I want to discuss as far as quantizing. Oh yeah, there was one process that we skipped yesterday. I was going to talk about reamping bass in the guitar. We've actually, we've changed the setups for vocals, so I'm actually not going to discuss the reamping of bass and guitar. And it's not difficult, and there's other Creative Live, there's a lot of Creative Live courses that cover that in detail. And basically just a quick, all you need is a reverse direct reamp box, and you send this direct signal out of the computer or out of the recorder if you use tape or whatever it is, out of the recorder through the reverse direct box back into an amp, and you just play the already recorded guitar again.
And you basically just
through a new amp.
record that new signal.
Yeah, you redo the amp, you reamp it. You could send it through an amp. You can send it through an amp emulator or a modeler or a profiler like the Kemper or the Axe Effects. And it's just the times you would want to do that is if, like, for instance, say, hey, this is a really good tone, but I like to thicken it up. It needs a little more mid-range. Let's run it with a Marshall, you know, because Mesa and Marshall gain structure is a little different. Mesa's got a really fat gain structure. Marshall's kind of a tighter gain structure, more, you know, mid-rangey in character. And like I said, maybe we'd reamp and layer those two. Obviously, you got to watch out for phase problems. You'll have to offset the waveform for phase problems. But
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, if you run two, that's one thing. Like I said, if you run two, like of the same exact
Yeah, yeah, I
guitar
think
with
it's-
same
yeah.
amp, they could cancel each other out.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So you can remedy that just by offsetting it in the computer just a little bit, you know, and just listening to it for, you know, your desired EQ. And they make phase boxes, which you can actually, you know, in some
Yeah, we
reamp
talked
boxes.
about that
yeah, they
yesterday a
have.
little
Yeah,
bit.
some reamp boxes have little phaser things that you can actually do. So there are a couple different remedies for that, but that kind of stuff, it's very easy to reamp.
Cool.
Sometimes I would do reamping for, like, you know, for instance, say we recorded this and like you start layering things up and like, wait a minute, that part has way too much gain. I can't even hear it in the mix.
Yeah.
No matter what I do in the mix, it's just muddy. Let me reamp it with a little brighter tone, with a little less gain, or something like that. Or sometimes it's the opposite. It's like, man, this doesn't sound brutal enough.
Yeah.
Let's just make this crazier. Or sometimes you're like, hey, I don't like this tone at all.
Yeah.
This amp's terrible. I've gotten, you know, stuff for mixing or whatever, and I'm just like, man, this is not what I'm accustomed to working with. Luckily, they track the direct signals. Let me reamp and use what I'm accustomed to working with, something I feel like sounds good. And you know, there's reamping's definitely a good thing to do.